What is up, everyone, and welcome back to another video. So in today's video, what we're going to be talking about is how to get better mechanics in Fortnite. By mechanics, I'm pretty much referring to your building, your editing, your piece control, and everything of that nature. Pretty much just how to become a smoother overall player, get your mechanics right, and improve at the game. So I'll be going over 3 different sections in this video. It's going to be building, editing, and then piece control. For each individual section, I'm basically going to tell you how to get better at that. Before we get into it though, be sure to drop a like if the video helps you out, subscribe to the channel if you're new and you want to see more content just like this in the future. And as always, guys, it's super appreciated if you could use code Teckoh in the item shop. It's entirely free for you and it seriously does help me out a bunch. As always, a big thank you to everyone who uses it. But with that said, and without further ado, let's get into today's video. So as you probably know, getting better mechanics can be really hard for some people. You may be playing creative, you might be practicing in game, you might be doing all this stuff, but feel like you're just not seeing consistent improvement. So that's why I'm going to go over exactly what you should be doing to get better mechanics and kind of just simplify the process for you. So in today's video, I'm basically going to give you guys the ultimate guide, everything you need to know to get your building, editing, and piece control on point. As mechanics get more complicated and crazy and everybody gets good mechanics, it's really important that you start locking in and improving on them now so you don't fall behind and become washed. So starting off with building, obviously some of this is going to come down to your binds. I do have a lot of videos about the best key binds and things of that nature, which you can feel free to check out. You definitely want to make sure your binds are optimal, and obviously that goes for your edit bind as well. So in terms of getting better at building, you really don't need any particular map for building in itself. I personally find that if you just spend some time free building and creative, whether you do that in a 1v1 map or your own map or whatever you want to do, just spending some time free building, getting used to the motions, practicing different techniques, it's going to be really good for you. I do have a lot of videos about the best build moves, best techniques you can use in box fights, and all sorts of stuff like that. So what I would recommend you do is you find some stuff you want to learn, find some techniques, basically jump into a free build map and just get after it. Building is one of those things that kind of just requires non-stop practice to get really good at, especially if you're newer to it or you're not quite familiar with advanced techniques. It takes a lot of time to really build a good base of techniques that you can always use. So obviously free building, getting in there and just practicing over and over again, doing that repetition with the stuff you struggle with is going to be a huge help. Another thing you can do is 1v1 players, specifically in realistics or build fights. If you're working on your overall fighting and basically every area of your mechanics, then realistic 1v1s could be good to give you some well-rounded practice. But if you want to focus specifically in on building, just get good at those retakes, get good at all those techniques, then build fight 1v1s are going to be really helpful. And when doing that, you want to do a couple of things. Obviously, you want to focus on protecting yourself at all times, focus on getting height, and establish some sort of piece control with your builds. Getting better at the actual mechanic of building is going to come with consistent free building, repetition of certain situations, and then you want to also apply that in fights. I also recommend playing some regular games or even ranked and focus solely on being efficient with your building. Doing this and repeating it in free building is going to kind of train your mind to build in a more complex way. You want to think critically about what you're doing and stay consistent under pressure situations. Obviously, in-game building is going to be a lot different than building in a build fight 1v1, and that's because nobody wants to get into a giant creative type build fight. So it's important that you practice sort of starts as well. What I mean is basically the first builds you place to gain the advantage in the first few seconds of the fight. You want to try to cut off your opponent, gain immediate high ground, and do things of that nature. I do think one way to do that is 1v1 speed realistics. It's a really good way to practice that skill because it's basically put you up against your opponent in close range and you immediately start building. So that can help you out a lot when it comes to starting the fight effectively. Another thing about building I really don't see people talk about a lot is that you really don't need to do a bunch of flashy moves to be good at it. It really has more to do with how consistent you are and how quick you can be basically doing the things you need to do. Like really, you don't need to go get into some crazy high ground retakes and crazy techniques, the stuff you see in like montages and stuff like that. That's really unnecessary, and it's cool to know, it can help you, but it's not going to do much for you winning fights in game. I also recommend one more thing for building, and that's seeing how other players build, especially pro players like Clicks and Peterbot and other good fighters who have been playing the game for a really long time and have pretty much mastered their mechanics. What you can do is look at their fights specifically from ranked or real games, because obviously you want to do things that are applicable, and take a look at the things they do and see what you can take away. Practice the techniques they use in certain situations and try to get good at what they do because obviously it works. So overall, if you do all of that, your building should be on point. Now getting into editing, this is a skill that's kind of hard to master, but if you get really good at it, you're going to have some of the best mechanics you can possibly have. So I'll go over how to get faster and more consistent with your editing and go over some common misconceptions that might be holding you back. So when we think about editing fast, there are quite a couple of factors that play into this, which are crosshair placement, your ping, the speed of your fingers, whether you have edit release on and off, and how fast you actually place the builds that you're editing. Since we already went over building and ping isn't really controllable for most of you guys, let's talk about crosshair placement. So crosshair placement kind of comes in 2 things. One is essentially the skill of not moving your mouse or stick too much when editing. So placing your crosshair in the closest spot to the rest of the tiles that you're editing when you first open it. And then you've got crosshair placement in the sense of moving towards your opponent. So say you're trying to go for a peek on somebody, you want to go the furthest tile from them them first and then basically edit into your opponent. So if my opponent's on my right side, for example, and I'm doing a top right corner edit, I would want to start with the top and then make my way onto the right side. That way my crosshair lands close to my opponent and I don't have to do a big move to actually hit them. As for crosshair placement practice, I think Raiders Mechanics training map has some of the best crosshair placement practice. It's got piece control scenarios, it's got a crosshair placement section, it's pretty much got everything you need. So I'll put the code on screen so you can put it into your game and try it out. It has a bunch of different drills that show you where you should be editing the tiles and how far you should go. So if you're really not familiar with what I'm trying to explain here, this will pretty much simplify it for you. Crosshair placement when it comes to editing is pretty hard to master, but if you get good at it, you'll find that it can basically become like second nature. And just by making your edits a little bit more efficient like that, it's going to help you a ton. And as I said before, this map also has some really good piece control and edit courses, so you can practice your edits and builds in tight quarters, which are really good for in-game. If I'm not mistaken, it also has a free build section, so that's a great way to practice your editing, of course, in conjunction with building. And overall, just by putting in the repetition, practicing your edits, and doing all that stuff, it'll help you improve your editing an absolute ton. Now, you may be wondering, why don't I have any like edit courses or edit related maps? The reason I don't put these in these videos is simply because I think your editing practice is going to be so much more efficient if you do it in a manner that you're actually going to use in game. We can all practice our triple edits all day, but in the end, is that really going to make you a better fighter or make your editing applicable to fighting? That's kind of debatable, but personally, in my opinion, the best way to improve your editing is just to practice the situations that actually occur in game. So that's where that map that I just showed you guys comes into play. But getting into the last section of today's video, and this is going to be piece control. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time talking about piece control, since if you click on pretty much any YouTube video about getting better at Fortnite or getting better mechanics, you're pretty much instantly going to hear them chirping about piece control. I'm sure most of you guys know what piece control is and how to establish it. If you don't know, it's basically using the builds to cut off your opponent, control the fight, make it so they can't get away, and make it so you can get a good peek. But I'll give you guys some basic tips on how to be more consistent with it and where to practice it. So as far as consistency goes, a lot of piece control has to do with how good your building and editing is and how smart you are of a fighter. If you're able to handle those high pressure situations and keep your head together when you're in a fight, you're going to be able to be so much more successful, and piece control is basically going to come naturally. When you're in a fight, you should always think about how you can cone off a player, get a ramp on their place some walls, just some way of establishing piece control so you can have a huge advantage in the fight. 9 times out of 10, the player who has the control of the fight and has established piece control is the one who's going to win. It's all pretty simple. It really comes with repetition and focusing solely on piece control when you're actually practicing your fighting. Circling back, I really recommend the Raiders Mechanics map as well for this, because it has really good piece control courses like the tunnel and one where you can actually shoot a bot after you piece it up. It's got a ton of different piece control scenarios and they actually do help a lot. One other map I recommend you play is a piece control 1v1 map. It's basically like a bigger box fight and it forces you to establish piece control since you're kind of in an enclosed environment. I think it's a really good thing to do even like when you're warming up or just trying to get some general creative practice in, especially if you're just starting to incorporate piece control into your routine and it's something you're just now looking to improve at. You can play with a friend or you can matchmake with randoms, so you always got someone to play against, and the creator always updates the weapons as well. They also have duos and trios game modes, so you could queue into those with your team if you want to, but if you're just starting out and trying to focus on your own piece control, then I recommend just starting with the solo one. So I'll go ahead and put the code up to this map on screen. But with that said, guys, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for today's video. All in all, if you use the techniques I talked about to practice your building, editing, and piece control, you're going to get some dramatically better mechanics this season, pretty much no matter what skill level you start at. Whether you're a beginner or you've been doing this for a while, this video should help you out, give you guys some good maps, and give you guys some good ideas you can use to get really good mechanics. If you found this video helpful, then be sure to drop a like on it, subscribe to the channel if you're new and you want to see more content just like this in the future. And as always, guys, it's super appreciated if you could use code Teckoh in the item shop. It's 100% free for you and it seriously does help me out a bunch. As always, a big thank you to everyone who uses it. But with all that said, guys, thank you all for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.